Good morning, darlings. I am so excited to see you this morning. I hope you are loving this week. I know I am. Yesterday we were in Colossians 1:10. We are going to finish up 1:10 today so we can move on to the rest of the text all the way through 14 this week. Colossians 1:9 through 14 is where we are. I'm going to read 9 and 10 to get us started this morning. And so from the day we heard, we have not ceased to pray for you, asking that you may be filled with the knowledge of his will in all spiritual wisdom and understanding, so as to walk in a manner worthy of the Lord, fully pleasing to him. Today, this part of 10 is what we'll discuss. Bearing fruit in every good work and increasing in the knowledge of God. That is the last part of Colossians 1:10 that we are going to read today. We are actually going to go over a couple of books into John 15, and this is literally some of my favorite texts. And like I said before, I said about everything out of the Bible because it's all my favorite, but truly this is another level of favorite, if you can have levels of favorite in the Word. This is one of my favorite parts of the text because I feel like it expresses God's heart to love us to the end. He just will love us all the way down to our bone. Like, he just loves every part. He wants to express his love to every part of our lives, not just one area, or he wants one part of our lives to be fruitful, or just one area to be successful or fruitful. He wants the landscape of our whole life to bear much fruit. Abundant life is what it says in John 10:10. Is what God is after. And like I said, today we are going to go in that second half of Colossians 1:10, bearing fruit in every good work and increasing in the knowledge of God. This idea of bearing fruit is kind of the idea of being the fruit of light. We talked yesterday about walking in the light, walking as children of the light. Today we're talking about bearing the fruit of the light, that we want to bear fruit as we walk in a manner worthy of the Lord. This idea of the fruit of light is similar to the idea of the fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, and self-control. You cannot bear those things, you cannot have or obtain those things if you are not accepting the full measure of God's work in your life. We have said numerous times in studying together, we need to yield all in order to gain all. I've got to yield all of my humanness. We talked on Monday about how in order to gain heavenly blessings, I am going to have to release some of my human tendencies. Like, there are some human natures that I'm going to have to let go of in order to obtain that fruit of the light. And today we're going to talk in John 15. I'm going to read here John 15, 1 through 11 is what I'm going to read. And it says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. Verse 2 is going to be our focus for today. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. Already you are clean because of the word that I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you, as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine. Neither can you, unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. Apart from Jesus, our lives just lack that full measure of fruit. God wants us to have all the fruit and bear all the fruit for others. If anyone does not abide in me, he is thrown away like a branch and withers. And the branches are gathered, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you abide in me, and my word abides in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit. God wants us to bear fruit in our lives. It says that is the place where he is most glorified. And so prove to be my disciples in other kind of ideas or other texts or other languages, other kind of expressions of this text, that we would be known as his children. Prove to be known as my children. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be full. there's so much there we could go over, but the one thing I want us to just really just key in on is this idea, and I know you've heard it before, that a tree is known by its fruit. I cannot want to be a peach tree. I cannot want to bear the fruit of peaches as a peach tree if I am not being put in the ground as a peach pit, watered, allowed to take deep root and grow up as a peach tree. I cannot just stand beside a peach tree and magically want to bear peach fruit. I cannot do that. I have to allow myself to be planted deep within the earth, allow that to take root, allow it to be watered, allow the sun to shine on it, allow it to burst forth out of the earth and grow up and bear the fruit of peaches. This same idea is true in our lives. We have to position our lives to grow the right kind of fruit, and it has to be personal. You cannot stand beside someone that is bearing the fruits of the Spirit and somehow bear those same fruits. It has got to be personal. Personally, we have to plant our lives deep within the roots of Christ so that He can bear the fruit of Christ. That is the only way it happens. So flip over quickly to Psalm 1. Psalm 1:1. Psalm 1:1. It says, "Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. He is like a tree planted by the streams of water that yields fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither. In all that he does, he prospers." I want to bear the fruit of Christ. That's what I want to do. That's what I want you to do. That's what God wants us all to do. But the only way we do that is if we plant our roots deep, deep into Christ and allow Him to plant those roots so deep that we have no choice but to burst forth through the earth and bear the fruit of Christ. The idea, this idea that it says here in text, it says, in verse 2, "Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, He takes it away." The vine dresser, as God, He takes it away. He completely removes that branch from the tree. And every branch that does bear fruit, He prunes that it may bear more fruit. So to not be like pruned or some branches broken it's not realistic. At some point, every branch is going to get touched. Every part of your life will get touched by God if you will allow Him space to work. If you will give Him the capacity to do His job, to be the vine dresser, He will work His way through every vine in your life so that it may bear much fruit. And those that are not bearing fruit any longer, He will remove. He will remove. When we first moved to Weatherford, Oklahoma, when we very first moved here, there were crepe myrtles everywhere. Everybody was planting crepe myrtles. It seemed like the community we lived in was obsessed with crepe myrtles. And they grew up and they were beautiful. They were these full, beautiful crepe myrtles. Some just as, kind of front landscaping bushes, and some would grow up into these beautiful trees that were very manicured and with these beautiful trunks and these gorgeous blooms every spring. I mean, it was spectacular. I felt like I couldn't go anywhere without someone saying, "Crepe myrtles for sale" or something. But the oddest thing we noticed was that they would whack these suckers to the nubs after every spring and summer. It was like in the winter and the fall, I mean, they would just whack these beautiful crepe myrtles, and I never understood why in the world did they do that. Why would you just whack that thing? It looked beautiful. And sure as I saw anything happen, they would whack those things to the nubs, and they would grow back up even more spectacular than they did the year before. That is what God wants to do in our lives. Even the branches that are bearing fruit, God will still prune, because He knows better than we know. He knows that those areas in our lives that are bearing fruit, He wants them to bear much fruit. Remember what it says later in text, in this John 15 text? It says, "By this my Father is glorified." This is in verse 8. "That you bear much fruit." God wants us to continually bear fruit. So with this idea in mind, today, I want you to do this exercise in your own journals or wherever, on your notes on your phone, separate into 2 categories. I want you to do this. This idea here, and I have this little crepe myrtle. Isn't it such a great crepe myrtle? I know, it looks just like it. I know, it's amazing. But anyway, draw your own version of a tree that looks much better than mine. But right here on this first little part of my notes, I have written, where does God need to create greater growth? Where are those branches in my life? What can I write down that it's no longer bearing fruit? And he needs to whack it off so that I can have greater growth in my life. That there's something that's hanging on, that I'm hanging on to. Is it sin? Is it some kind of an open door to God? I mean, remember, we said yesterday, that Oswald Chambers quote, it said, as long as I stay internally open to God, that's where he can work. Where am I closing myself off and not allowing God to give me room to grow? Okay, and then the next one I want you to do, the next tree I want you to create, is right up here in my other crepe myrtle tree. I say, where does God want to prune to create room for growth? That there is something that he sees in my life where he wants to create room for greater growth, or that it would be more expanse, or that there would be greater areas where it could grow. Now the first one, we want to see where God literally wants to remove a dead branch. Like, what is a dead branch that he needs to remove? Is there a relationship that is keeping us from following fully God? Is there something in our lives like sin, or like I said, a closed off door that is keeping us from growing, that is preventing that growth in God? It needs to be removed. The next tree, we want to see where God wants to create room just to grow something, that he wants to prune it back and clean it up and really give it the space and the freedom to just feel free. Where do you need to accept what we talked about yesterday, and just stepping up into the calling and walking out in a manner worthy of the position that God has given you? Where do you need to allow God to kind of spread your wings and fly a little bit? I want you to think on these 2 things, and then tomorrow we are going to go out of Colossians 1:10 and on into the further part of the text in Colossians 11 and 12. I can't wait to be with you tomorrow, and I really hope that you consider where God wants to bear much fruit in your life and be glorified in who and what he's created you to be. I cannot wait to see you tomorrow.